Look, I've been sitting on this story for months now, and I need to get it off my chest because honestly, I'm still processing how everything went down. Some of you are going to think I'm the biggest piece of work on the planet, but I need to tell someone what happened. So here's the setup. I'm Marco, 34, and I've been married to Naomi for 6 years. My older brother Jensen has always been the golden child in our family. Makes 3 times what I do, drives a Mercedes, lives in this ridiculous house that looks like something out of a magazine. Me? I was working at a mid-level tech company, driving my 2018 Nissan Sentra that's perfectly fine, but apparently not impressive enough, living in our decent but not flashy apartment. The thing is, I've always known Naomi had a thing about status. When we got married, she'd make these little comments about how Jensen's wife Diana gets to travel to Europe twice a year, how their kitchen renovation costs more than our annual rent, how Jensen just seems to have his life together in ways I don't. I figured it was just normal comparison stuff that couples go through, you know? Every family has dynamics. But here's what none of them knew. I'd been planning something for almost 2 years. See, I'm not stupid. I could see the way Naomi looked at Jensen at family gatherings, the way she'd suddenly get quiet when he talked about his work or his latest purchase. I could see how she'd dress up extra nice when we visited them, how she'd laugh just a little too loud at his jokes. And Jensen, he'd do this thing where he'd put his hand on her shoulder when he talked to her, stand just a little too close, make these comments about how I was lucky to have someone like her. So I started documenting patterns. Not in some creepy way, just mentally noting things. The way they'd exchange looks, how Naomi would check her phone more often after family dinners, how Jensen would text me about getting together but then suggest we bring Naomi along. I'm not paranoid. I'm observant. And what I observed told me I needed to be ready for something. The job thing happened on a Thursday in March. Our company had been struggling for months, and they finally did a round of layoffs. 15 people got cut, including me. It wasn't personal, it wasn't about performance, just numbers on a spreadsheet. I'd actually seen it coming and had been preparing financially, but I knew Naomi was going to lose it. I came home around 2 p.m. and found her in the kitchen making lunch. I told her straight up that I'd been laid off, but that we'd be fine. We had savings. I already had some leads on other positions. What happened next was like watching someone I'd never met before. Naomi just stared at me for maybe 10 seconds, then started laughing. Not happy laughing, this bitter, angry sound. She told me she couldn't believe this was her life, that she was married to someone who couldn't even keep a basic job. Then she really went off. She said Jensen would never let something like this happen to him because he actually knows how to handle his career. She said I was pathetic compared to him, that he makes triple my salary and actually knows how to satisfy a woman in ways I clearly don't understand. The satisfy a woman comment hit different, you know? That's not something you say in anger unless you've been thinking about it already. I just sipped my coffee and looked at her. I told her that was funny because that's not what she'd said the night before when we were in bed. Real calm, no emotion. That's when she completely lost it. She yanked her wedding ring off and threw it at me. Said she was done pretending to be happy with my mediocre life. She said she was moving in with Jensen and Diana today. At least Jensen drives a Mercedes instead of my rusty piece of junk Nissan. She said I could enjoy unemployment while she figured out what she actually wanted from life. I told her she should take my credit cards too, she'd probably need them. I was still just sitting there drinking my coffee like we were discussing weekend plans. What she didn't know was that I'd been expecting this conversation for months. Not exactly this way, but I knew the marriage was over. I'd been preparing in ways she couldn't imagine. I'd already moved money around, changed passwords, made some calls to people who could help me with certain situations. When someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. And Naomi had been showing me for 2 years. About an hour later, Jensen showed up. He had this weird energy, like he was trying to act casual but was actually excited. He walked in and put his arm around Naomi's waist right in front of me. Said he was sorry about my situation, but that real men take what they want in life. He said I should enjoy unemployment while he enjoys my wife. I handed him her bags. I'd already packed them while she was on the phone with him. I told him she was all his now, and that the receipt was in the front pocket if he needed to return anything. They both looked confused for a second, but then Jensen just shrugged and they headed out to his Mercedes. I could hear them laughing as they drove away. Now here's the thing, and this is where some of you are going to think I'm either brilliant or completely insane. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't even surprised. I was ready. See, I'd figured out months ago that this was going to happen eventually. Naomi had been dropping hints, Jensen had been circling like a shark, and I'd been preparing for the moment when they'd finally make their move. What they didn't know is that I'd been setting up contingencies for almost a year. I'm not talking about anything illegal, just smart planning for someone who could see the writing on the wall. I'd been moving assets, changing account access, documenting things they thought were private, building relationships with people who could help me when the time came. The receipt comment? That wasn't just me being sarcastic. There actually was a receipt in that bag, one that was going to matter a lot more than either of them realized. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened over the next few days because it gets so much more interesting. Update 1. The responses to my first post have been incredible, and some of you are asking for updates, so here we go. Buckle up because this gets wild. So after Jensen and Naomi drove off in his Mercedes laughing like they just won the lottery, I spent the evening doing what I'd been preparing to do for months. See, when I said I'd been getting ready, I meant I'd been really getting ready, not just emotionally, practically. About 8 months ago, I started noticing how Naomi would suddenly need to run errands that took way longer than they should. How she'd get texts during family dinners and immediately put her phone face down. How she started buying lingerie that she never wore around me but would mysteriously disappear from her drawer for days. I'm not stupid, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting to be blindsided, so I did what any smart person does when they see trouble coming. I prepared for war. First thing I did that Thursday night was call my lawyer. Yeah, I have a lawyer. Got one 6 months ago when I realized where this was headed. His name is Pablo, and he specializes in cases exactly like mine. I'd already given him a heads up that things were about to go nuclear, so when I called him at 7 p.m., he was ready. Pablo told me what I already knew. In our state, adultery doesn't really matter for divorce proceedings, but it sure as hell matters for other things, like joint accounts, like the apartment lease that's in both our names, like the car loan for Naomi's Honda that I've been paying for 3 years. The receipt I mentioned? Here's where it gets good. See, Naomi thought she was being sneaky with her little shopping trips and mysterious errands. What she didn't realize is that I'd been tracking our joint credit card statements for months. Every purchase, every location, every time she bought something and claimed it was for groceries but spent $200 at Victoria's Secret. But the real kicker was the hotel receipt from 2 weeks ago. The Marriott downtown charged to our joint card for a Wednesday afternoon when she told me she was having lunch with her sister. Room service for two? Champagne. The works. And guess who was at a business conference at that same hotel that same week? Yeah, Jensen. So that receipt I put in her bag? It was a copy of that hotel bill, along with a little note that just said, "Thanks for making this easy." Now, some of you are probably thinking I'm some kind of vindictive psycho, but here's the thing. I genuinely loved Naomi for 6 years. I would have done anything for her, but she decided to throw it all away for my brother, and she thought she could do it without consequences. That's where she was wrong. Friday morning, my phone starts buzzing. It's Jensen. He's calling me like we're still buddies, like he didn't just walk off with my wife the day before. He tells me he thinks we should talk, that he wants to explain the situation, that he doesn't want this to affect our family relationships. I let him talk for about 10 minutes. He's going on about how sometimes people grow apart, how Naomi deserves someone who can provide for her properly, how he never meant for it to happen, but sometimes you can't help who you fall for. Real touching stuff. Then he gets to the part I was waiting for. He tells me he's willing to help me out financially while I look for a new job. Maybe cover my rent for a few months. Help me get back on my feet. He's being so generous, so understanding. What a great brother, right? I told him I appreciated the offer, but I was actually doing just fine. In fact, I was doing better than fine. See, that job I lost? I'd been planning to quit anyway. I'd already lined up something better, much better. A position with a startup that's about to go public, with stock options that are going to make Jensen's Mercedes money look like pocket change. The silence on his end was beautiful. He clearly hadn't expected that. But then he tries a different approach. He starts talking about how he knows this is hard for me, but Naomi's been unhappy for a long time. How she's told him things about our marriage that make it clear we weren't right for each other. How she's confided in him about things that I apparently never understood about her needs. That's when I knew he was fishing. He wanted to see what I knew, how much I'd figured out. So I decided to give him a little taste. I told him it was funny that he mentioned Naomi confiding in him, because she'd been confiding in me too. About how she thought someone was following her when she went out. About how she'd been getting weird feelings, like someone was watching her and Jensen when they thought they were being discreet. About how she was starting to wonder if maybe they hadn't been as careful as they thought they'd been. The silence got longer. Then Jensen's whole tone changed. Suddenly, he's not the understanding brother anymore. He's demanding to know what I mean by that. He's asking if I've been spying on them, if I've been stalking his wife Diana too, since we're family and all. He's getting aggressive, which told me everything I needed to know about how guilty he was feeling. I just laughed. I told him I didn't need to spy on anyone. They'd been doing all the work for me. Every text message sent on joint phone plans, every credit card charge on shared accounts, every location that gets automatically tracked when you're on the same family cell plan and don't bother to turn off location sharing. That's when he hung up on me. About 2 hours later, Naomi calls. She's crying, which would have destroyed me 6 months ago, but now just confirms that they found my little gift. She's asking me why I'm trying to hurt her, why I can't just let her be happy. She says she never meant for me to find out this way, that she was going to tell me eventually. I let her cry for a bit. Then I asked her a simple question. I asked her how long she thought she could keep charging hotel rooms to my credit card without me noticing. More crying? She tells me it only happened a few times, that it didn't mean anything at first, that she was confused and Jensen was just helping her figure out her feelings. She says she loves me, but she's not in love with me anymore, and that she thought I would understand because I'm such a good person. Then she asked me the question I'd been waiting for. She asked me what I want from her to make this easier for everyone. And here's where I started laying out the real plan. Because see, this was never just about catching them. This was about making sure that when the dust settled, I came out on top and they learned exactly what it costs to betray someone who's been nothing but good to you. I told Naomi we needed to meet in person to discuss the divorce terms. All three of us, me, her, and Jensen. Since he was so invested in her happiness now, I suggested Sunday afternoon at the coffee shop where we had our first date. Neutral territory, civilized conversation. She agreed immediately, probably thinking she could sweet-talk me into being reasonable. Jensen got back on the phone and said he'd be there too, that he wanted to make sure everything stayed respectful. Neither of them had any idea what they were walking into. Because you see, that new job I mentioned, it's not just any startup. It's a company that Jensen's been trying to get a consulting contract with for 8 months. A company where I now have significant influence over vendor relationships and partnership decisions. A company that's about to make some very expensive choices about who they work with and who they don't. Sunday's meeting isn't going to be about divorce terms. It's going to be about consequences. Update 2. Guys, I'm still shaking from what went down yesterday, and I need to tell you everything because, holy hell, this was even better than I hoped. So Sunday rolls around and I get to the coffee shop early. Same place where Naomi and I had our first date 6 years ago, which I thought was a nice touch. I'm sitting there with my laptop, looking like I'm just working on some casual stuff, when they walk in together. The sight of them made me realize how long I'd been preparing for this exact moment. Naomi's wearing this dress I've never seen before, probably bought it with my credit card for one of her hotel visits with Jensen. Jensen's got his arm around her like they're some power couple, both of them trying to look confident and in control. They sit down across from me, and Jensen immediately starts with his big brother routine. He tells me he's glad we can handle this like adults, that he knows this situation is complicated, but he wants everyone to come out of it okay. He says he's prepared to be generous in the divorce settlement because he doesn't want bad blood in the family. I just looked at him and started laughing. Not fake laughing, genuine amusement. I told him that was really thoughtful of him, being so generous with assets that aren't his. That's when Naomi jumps in. She starts going on about how she never wanted to hurt me, how she fought her feelings for Jensen for months before anything happened. She says she knows I'm a good person and I deserve to be happy, but she can't pretend to be something she's not anymore. She tells me she's already talked to a lawyer, and she thinks we can make this as painless as possible for everyone. I let her finish her whole speech. Then, I opened my laptop and turned it around so they could see the screen. It was our joint bank account page showing a balance of exactly $12.37. Jensen's face went completely blank. He asks me what happened to the rest of our savings. I told him that was an interesting question, considering our savings account had been steadily drained over the past 8 months by someone who thought hotel rooms and expensive dinners were more important than building a future together. I said I'd simply moved my contributions to accounts that Naomi doesn't have access to, since she'd made it clear she preferred spending money on her relationship with him. Naomi starts getting defensive. She says she never spent that much money, that I'm exaggerating, that most of those charges were for legitimate things. She's getting louder, and people in the coffee shop are starting to look over. So I pull out a folder, yeah, I brought props, and start reading off charges. Marriott Hotel, Wednesday, March 15th, room service for 2. Victoria's Secret, Friday, March 10th, $247. Nordstrom, Saturday, March 18th, $412 for a dress she wore exactly once. Le Bernardin Restaurant, Thursday, March 23rd. Dinner for 2 at $360 when she told me she was having a girls' night with her sister. Jensen's trying to stay calm, but I can see him starting to sweat. He tells me that those are just expenses, that couples spend money on things, that I'm being petty by tracking every purchase. That's when I dropped the real bomb. I told Jensen that speaking of expenses, I'd had an interesting conversation with his boss on Friday. See, Jensen works for a consulting firm that's been desperate to land a contract with tech startups in our city. They've been pitching my new company for months, trying to get their foot in the door for a project that would be worth about $2 million over 3 years. The silence at our table was deafening. I explained that as the new director of strategic partnerships at my startup, I have final approval on all consulting relationships. And wouldn't you know it, Jensen's firm was scheduled for a final presentation this Tuesday. What a crazy coincidence. Jensen's whole demeanor changed. He leans forward and tells me I can't mix business with personal issues, that it would be unethical to let our family situation affect professional decisions. He says his firm's proposal stands on its own merit, and that I'd be making a mistake to let emotions cloud my judgment. I told him he was absolutely right. Business and personal should never mix. That's why I'd already made my recommendation to the CEO based purely on the merits of the different proposals we'd received. Unfortunately for Jensen's firm, their presentation had some significant weaknesses that I'd identified during my analysis. Naomi's catching on now. She asked me what I'm trying to do if I'm trying to hurt Jensen professionally, just because I'm angry about our marriage. I looked right at her and told her I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just doing my job, making the best decisions for my company, based on the information available to me. If Jensen's firm loses the contract, it's because they weren't the best choice, not because of any personal feelings. But then I mentioned something else that might interest them. See, when you work in partnerships, you get to know people at other companies too. And it turns out several firms in town have been asking around about Jensen's consulting work, doing reference checks for potential contracts. Funny how word gets around in a small business community. Jensen stands up. He's not playing nice anymore. He tells me I'm being vindictive and childish, that I can't destroy his career just because I can't handle losing Naomi. He says if I think I can intimidate him by threatening his livelihood, I'm making a serious mistake. I stayed sitting. I told him I wasn't threatening anyone. I was just sharing information about how business relationships work in our industry. When companies are considering major contracts, they want to work with people they trust, people who demonstrate good judgment and integrity in all aspects of their lives. That's when Naomi really lost it. She started yelling about how I'm trying to ruin their happiness, how I'm being controlling and manipulative. She says she should have known I'd try to punish them for being honest about their feelings. She's crying now, asking me why I can't just let them be together without trying to destroy everything. The whole coffee shop is staring at us now, which was exactly what I wanted. I very calmly told her that I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was simply protecting my own interests after discovering that my wife and my brother had been betraying me for months while using my money to fund their affair. I said if that made me vindictive, then I guess I was vindictive. Jensen sits back down and tries a different approach. He says he understands I'm hurt, but that he's still my brother and he wants to find a way to fix this. He offers to pay back every penny that Naomi spent on their relationship. He says they'll cover the divorce costs, help me get settled somewhere new, whatever I need to move forward. I told him that was generous, but it was a little late for apologies and settlements. See, the thing about trust is that once it's broken, it affects everything. How could I trust his company to deliver on a major contract when he'd already shown he was willing to lie to and betray his own family? How could any business partner trust someone who would systematically deceive the person closest to him for months while spending that person's money to do it? The look on his face was everything I'd been working toward for months. But here's the thing. I wasn't done. Because while they were sitting there trying to figure out how to salvage Jensen's business reputation, they had no idea about the other preparations I'd been making. I told them I'd gotten an interesting call from Diana on Saturday. Jensen's wife had some questions about their joint accounts, seemed to think there might be some unauthorized charges she wanted to discuss with him. Apparently, she'd been doing some checking of her own after I'd accidentally mentioned to her at the last family dinner that Jensen had been working such long hours on client dinners recently. Jensen went completely white. He asked me what I told Diana. I said I didn't tell Diana anything. I just mentioned that he'd been putting in a lot of evening hours lately and that Naomi had mentioned seeing him around town during some of her errands. Diana's a smart woman. She could draw her own conclusions. Naomi's staring at Jensen now with this look of panic. She asks him if Diana knows about them, if she's going to cause problems for them. And that's when I realized something beautiful. They hadn't thought this through. They'd been so focused on sneaking around and having their affair that they never considered what would happen when the sneaking was over. Jensen's marriage, his business relationships, his family connections, they were all about to become collateral damage in their little love story. I closed my laptop and told them I had to go. I had a busy week ahead of me with the partnership presentations and all. I mentioned that Tuesday's meeting was going to be particularly interesting. As I was walking out, I heard Jensen calling after me, telling me we needed to finish this conversation. But I was done talking. The real show is just getting started. Final update. All right, Reddit. Here's how this whole mess finally ended. Some of you have been asking for updates, and honestly, I needed some time to process everything that went down. So Tuesday rolls around, and Jensen's consulting firm gives their presentation to my company. I sat in that conference room and watched my brother pitch a $2 million contract like his life depended on it. And maybe it did, because by that point, Diana had already started asking him some very pointed questions about their joint accounts. The presentation itself was actually decent. Jensen's good at what he does. I'll give him that. But when it came time for the Q&A session, I asked some very specific questions about their company's approach to ethics and integrity in client relationships, how they handle conflicts of interest, what their policies are around transparency and trust. You could see Jensen sweating through his shirt. We told them we'd make our decision by Friday. Jensen lingered after everyone else left, trying to get a moment alone with me. But I just told him I'd evaluate all the proposals fairly based on their merits. Wednesday night, around 11 p.m., my doorbell starts ringing. Not just once. Someone's laying on it like the building's on fire. I look through the peephole, and there they are. Jensen and Naomi, both looking like they haven't slept in days. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for. I open the door, and Jensen immediately starts talking. He tells me Diana found the hotel charges, that she's filed for divorce and frozen their joint accounts. He says his firm didn't get our contract, and now his boss is asking questions about his recent performance. Naomi's behind him crying, saying her sister won't talk to her anymore because she told her the truth about the affair. They want to come inside to talk. I told them we could talk right there on my doorstep. Jensen says he knows he messed up, that he let his feelings for Naomi cloud his judgment, but that he's still my brother and we should be able to work this out. He offers to pay me back for everything Naomi spent, to help me however I need, if I'll just give them a chance to make things right. Naomi jumps in saying she realizes now that she made a huge mistake, that she got caught up in the excitement of something new and forgot about everything we'd built together. She's asking me to please not let this destroy our family, to find a way to forgive them. And you know what? For about 30 seconds, I actually considered it. 6 years of marriage, 28 years of having Jensen as my big brother, that's not nothing. But then I remembered sitting in that hotel parking lot 8 months ago, watching them come out together while I was supposed to be at work. I remembered every lie, every fake smile at family dinners, every time they made me feel like I was crazy for noticing the way they looked at each other. I told them I was glad they finally wanted to be honest, but that they were about 8 months too late for that conversation. Jensen gets desperate. He says he'll do anything to fix this, that he can't lose his marriage and his relationship with me over a stupid mistake. He asks what I want from them, what it would take to make this right. I looked at both of them standing there in my hallway at midnight, finally understanding that actions have consequences. And I realized something. I didn't want anything from them anymore. I told Jensen that his marriage problems with Diana were between them, and if his business was suffering because people questioned his character, maybe he should think about why they had reason to question it. I told Naomi that her family relationships were her responsibility to repair, and that I wasn't interested in being the villain in her story about finding herself. But here's the thing that felt the best. I told them both that I was actually doing great. That new job I mentioned? It came with a signing bonus that was more than Jensen makes in 6 months. The apartment I'd been looking at? I put an offer in last week and it was accepted. My lawyer Pablo had the divorce papers ready to file. And with the prenup we'd signed and the documented adultery, I was keeping pretty much everything that mattered. The look on their faces when they realized I didn't need anything from them was better than any revenge I could have planned. Naomi asks if there's really no way to fix this, if I really want to throw away everything we had together. I told her we'd thrown it away 8 months ago when she decided hotel rooms with my brother were more important than honesty with her husband. Jensen makes one last attempt. He says that despite everything, we're still family, and that has to count for something. He says he's willing to go to counseling, to do whatever work it takes to rebuild our relationship. I told him he was right that family should count for something. That's exactly why what he did was so unforgivable. Then, I told them both I had an early meeting Thursday morning and I needed to get some sleep. I wished them luck figuring out their situation and closed the door. I could hear them talking in the hallway for another 10 minutes before they finally left. Thursday morning, I woke up in my own apartment, made coffee in my own kitchen, and got ready for my new job where I'm actually valued and respected. Jensen's consulting firm officially didn't get our contract. We went with a smaller company that impressed us with their integrity and attention to detail. As for Jensen and Naomi, last I heard from my parents, Jensen and Diana are getting divorced and he's looking for a new job after his firm let him go. Naomi moved back in with her parents temporarily while she figures out her next steps. They're apparently still together, trying to make their relationship work, now that it's not a secret anymore. Some of you might think I should have been more forgiving, that family is family and people make mistakes. Maybe you're right, but here's what I learned. When someone shows you who they really are, Believe them the first time. When someone proves they're willing to lie to your face for months while betraying your trust, they've made their choice about what your relationship is worth to them. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not plotting revenge or hoping they fail. I'm just living my life without people in it who think betrayal is acceptable, as long as they eventually apologize for getting caught. And honestly, I'm happier than I've been in years. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Sometimes you just need to tell the story to realize how much better off you are without certain people in your life.